We left off finishing our discussion on the impact of the birth and early childhood years of a family who has a child with a disability. Next in the family cycle are the childhood years. The typical functions and tasks required of the childhood stage are more complex for the family of a child who is identified with a disability. For children with disabilities who are not diagnosed at birth, the most common period for diagnosis is during the elementary school years. Regardless of when the diagnosis occurs, the family is likely to experience the grief cycle or some variation of it. During childhood, roughly from age 6 to 11, parents have the challenge of envisioning a future for their child. Parents of children with disabilities want the same things that all parents want for their children: a home, friends, happiness, and a chance to contribute to the community. At times, parents have to battle the be realistic system that special educators and other professionals create. I encourage you to create an environment that accepts vision over visibility. Set high goals. Don't look at the child and predetermine what you think the child can do because he or she looks a certain way on paper or in person. Good partnerships engage in the creation of a collective and mutually developed vision, marked by high expectations by all for the student. Major activities for families of elementary school age children include clarifying family goals, deciding appropriate services, and deciding on the learning environment that meets the needs of the student and that's most appropriate. Many of the issues associated with making decisions about educational placement for a child weigh heavily on families during this stage. Families begin to weigh the benefits and drawbacks of inclusion. IDEA promotes that students with disabilities must be educated with students who do not have disabilities to the maximum extent appropriate for the student. Many parents report being placed in the position of needing to convince educators that inclusion is appropriate for their child, while others are reluctant to challenge or disagree with educators for fear that their disagreement may result in a bias against the child. Similarly, many parents report that inclusive education programs could be more effective and efficient in meeting their child's needs and goals. Inclusion occurs most often for students between the ages of 6 to 11. However, as students grow older, the percentage of time spent in inclusive placement decreases. Why do you think this happens? There are key characteristics of inclusion. They include all students receiving education in the home school they would have attended if they had no exceptionality. Consideration is given to placing students in a classroom according to the principle of natural proportions. Teaching and learning is restructured for all students so that special education supports exist within the general education classrooms. And school and general education placements are age and grade appropriate. Parents value professionals who are accessible, available, and supportive to them during times when the educational environment is under review. Parents also appreciate professionals who are willing to assume responsibilities that may seem to go beyond the strict scope of their positions. They value professionals who support them through listening with empathy to their concerns and by sharing objective information in response to their questions. These are great ways to build trusting relationships with your families. It's also helpful to assist families in connecting with other families who may provide information or take them to visit different programs that will contribute to their understanding and decision making. I always recommend to families to go and visit different classrooms and schools. Look at the learning environments that are available and see what supports are in place. I also recommend this to teachers too. It's a great way to network and gain new ideas. Additional tasks that families face during the elementary school years include handling the reactions of the child's peer groups and siblings to his or her disability. Sometimes the parents haven't spoken to the child about the disability, so this is a good time to explore what it means to the student and perhaps awareness for others. As a teacher, you can provide information and resources about the disability and help find effective ways to talk about it. Oftentimes, schools will host disability awareness fairs or grade level or classroom programs focusing on similarities and differences. These types of awareness events can help decrease bullying and potential ostracism that may happen. Another resource teachers can provide to parents is information on support groups. When parents become engaged in support groups, they report higher levels of enjoyment in parenting. Adolescence is a time for many changes. It's the period when young people experience rapid growth, hormonal changes, and a newfound sexuality, as well as the need to challenge authority, often known as a stage of rebellion. Just because a student has a disability does not eliminate these typically developing milestones from occurring. Stressors associated with adolescence can impact the functioning of the entire family. In fact, parents of typically developing children report that adolescence and young adulthood are the two stages with the highest amount of stress. Unfortunately, a disability can compound some of these stressors for family. The values and expectations of adolescents are strongly rooted in and influenced by a family's ethical and racial background and their religious affiliations. Adolescence is more influenced by culture than any other life cycle. Some of the most important educational issues during this stage include sexuality and self-determination skills. As a teacher, it's important to remember that many adolescents with exceptionalities have the same desires and hopes for marriage, children, and sexual intimacy. However, currently, approximately 5% of students receive sexuality education, and only 21 states in the U.S. require sexuality education. That number decreases dramatically with the population of children with disabilities. Sexuality education may sound taboo, but it has many benefits. It prepares students to live and thrive in a diverse society, reduces the likelihood that persons with disabilities will be sexually victimized, promotes appropriate sexual behavior, decreases the number of teen pregnancies and sexually transmitted diseases, and allows a forum to address age-appropriate relationships and questions associated with puberty. So is it a good thing? Absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, the foundation for self-determination begins in early childhood. Self-determination receives more focused attention in adolescence. One of the tasks of adolescence is to develop a sense of self or personal identity. All adolescents begin to compare themselves with others during this stage, and they begin to develop a sense of their own strengths and weaknesses. The presence of a chronic illness, physical impairment, behavior disorder, or other disability may negatively influence this adolescent's self-esteem and identity. Typical adolescent resistance to authority may exhibit itself for adolescents with disabilities as noncompliance, as seen when there is refusal to monitor blood sugars for someone with diabetes, or when one refuses to take other prescribed medications. The struggle between dependence and independence that characterizes many adolescent relationships is intensified for families of adolescents with disabilities. While developing independence is a primary task at this stage, there are often very real physical, cognitive, and emotional needs that make this time more of a struggle for those who have a disability. Self-determination is defined by one's cultural norms, including collectivism and individualism. Self-determination is promoted through building on students' interests and chosen direction, allowing them to express choices, and encouraging them to act on their preferences. During this time, there should be a focus on the creation of self-determination goals and incorporation of these goals into a student's IEP. This is also the time for the adolescent to become more involved in the decision-making process at the annual IEP review and IEP meetings in preparation for assuming new roles at the age of 18. This is a move toward independence that may require the professional to provide support and guidance to the adolescent as well as to the other family members. When self-determination is fostered, positive outcomes increase. Adolescents who are self-determined have increased post-high school outcomes, including paid employment. It also predicts active student involvement in educational planning and decision-making. It allows them to choose their destiny. There is an awesome model of self-determination instruction in the assigned textbook chapter. Please take time to review that model. Adulthood is the final stage we will consider. Adulthood has three distinct dimensions: autonomy, membership, and change. Each of these dimensions is associated with different milestones or symbols. For instance, employment is a symbol of autonomy. Voting is a symbol of membership. And marriage is a symbol of change. Many individuals with disabilities face numerous challenges with the transition to adulthood, including difficulty carrying out family functions and obtaining opportunities for choice and control, as well as limited opportunities to participate in post-secondary educational programs and limited opportunities for gainful employment. Parents and professionals facilitate this transition into adulthood by identifying post-secondary education programs and supports and accessing supported employment options. It's not all doom and gloom, but there are some obstacles when identifying post-secondary educational programs and supports for individuals with disabilities. First, only a third of high school graduates with disabilities attend post-secondary programs. That is compared to 75% of typically developing individuals who enter some kind of post-secondary program. Students with disabilities are also at increased risk of dropping out of high school and post-secondary education programs. Fortunately, post-secondary programs are developing support services and programs to support students with learning and developmental disabilities. Many changes need to occur across institutions in order for them to be fully accessible, though. Employment is the area where individuals with disabilities experience the widest gap with their non-disabled peers. Approximately 32% of working-age persons with disabilities are employed full or part-time, compared to 80% of working-age people without disabilities. Even though 2 out of 3 unemployed persons with disabilities indicate that they would like a job. What are some of the future trends? There are disability organizations that are providing assistance with startup costs to enable adults with disabilities to launch their own business. Will self-employment be the only option? Hopefully, businesses will begin to recognize that individuals with disabilities have strengths, interests, and talents that enable them to be competitive in the workplace. Regardless of the stage, each stage begins with change, additional demands, and a new set of stressors. How the family responds to these situations determines in part the way in which the family functions. The movement from one stage to another and the accompanying adjustment period is considered to be a transition. Transitions can be challenging and stressful for families who have a child with an exceptionality. Why? Well, generally because there is uncertainty about the future. The rituals that serve as punctuation marks for transitions of youth without disabilities may be blurred or even non-existent for youth with disabilities. Furthermore, in the past, and often still today, schools have not emphasized futures planning, leaving adulthood planning up to the families. Fortunately, to promote futures planning, IDEA requires a coordinated set of transition services to be offered for students progressing to adulthood.